August 10th, 2019, 6:30 a.m. Metropolitan Correctional Center, Manhattan. A guard walks down the corridor of the Special Housing Unit, cell 220. He peers through the window. Jeffrey Epstein is hanging from his bed, unresponsive, orange bedsheet around his neck. Within minutes, the prison erupts into chaos. By 7:30 a.m., he's pronounced dead at a nearby hospital. The world's most infamous sex trafficker was gone, but the question everyone asked wasn't, how did he die? It was, did he actually kill himself? To understand why his death became the most controversial event of 2019, you need to understand who Jeffrey Epstein was. Billionaire, financier, philanthropist. At least that's what his public image showed. Private jets, a private island in the Caribbean, connections to presidents, princes, and CEOs. But behind the wealth was something darker. For decades, Epstein ran a sophisticated sex trafficking operation. He recruited underage girls, some as young as 14, and abused them in his properties across Manhattan, Palm Beach, and his private island. In 2008, he got a sweetheart deal. Despite overwhelming evidence, he served only 13 months in a county jail with work release privileges. It was a scandal, but Epstein walked free. Then, in July 2019, federal prosecutors arrested him again. This time, the charges were serious: sex trafficking of minors. He faced up to 45 years in prison. There would be no deal this time, and that's when things started to unravel. Epstein was held at the Metropolitan Correctional Center, one of the most secure federal prisons in America, the same place that held El Chapo and other high-profile criminals. He was placed in the Special Housing Unit under suicide watch after his legal team argued he was at risk. July 23, 2019, just 2 weeks after his arrest, guards found Epstein semi-conscious on the floor of his cell, marks on his neck. He claimed he didn't remember what happened. His cellmate, a former cop named Nicholas Tartaglione, said he was trying to help him. Doctors couldn't determine if it was a suicide attempt or an assault, but here's where it gets interesting. Some believed Epstein tried to kill himself because he couldn't handle prison. Others thought Tartaglione, facing the death penalty himself, might have attacked him to gain leverage. And then there was a third theory. Someone wanted to send Epstein a message. But regardless of what actually happened, Epstein survived. He was placed on suicide watch, under 24/7 observation, for 6 days. On July 29th, psychologists removed him from suicide watch. He was cleared. According to their evaluation, he was no longer at risk. He was moved back to his cell, now with a new cellmate for safety. Standard protocol. Everything seemed under control. But in 2 weeks, Jeffrey Epstein would be dead. August 8th, 2019, 2 days before Epstein's death, nearly 2,000 pages of court documents were unsealed. Detailed allegations, names, testimonies from victims describing abuse. The documents implicated powerful people in Epstein's circle. The media exploded. Epstein was front-page news again. The pressure was mounting. That same day, prison officials transferred Epstein's cellmate out of the cell. Epstein was now alone. This violated MCC's own protocols, which required high-profile inmates to have a cellmate. And here's where things get suspicious. The camera directly outside Epstein's cell had malfunctioned. It wasn't recording. The 2 guards assigned to check on him every 30 minutes hadn't completed their rounds. Later investigations revealed they were sleeping and browsing the internet instead. August 9th, into the early morning of August 10th, Epstein was alone in his cell. No cellmate, no working camera, no guards checking on him. And at some point during the night, Jeffrey Epstein died. 6:30 a.m., August 10th, the guards finally checked on Epstein. He was hanging from the top bunk of his bed, an orange bedsheet tied around his neck, the other end secured to the bed frame. His knees were bent, almost touching the floor. Guards attempted CPR. Paramedics rushed him to New York Presbyterian Hospital. At 7:36 a.m., he was pronounced dead. Within hours, the world knew. And immediately, people were skeptical. The hashtag Epstein didn't kill himself trended worldwide. August 11th, Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Barbara Sampson performed the autopsy. The findings: multiple fractures in Epstein's neck, including a broken hyoid bone, a small bone near the Adam's apple. Now, here's the thing. Hyoid fractures are found in about 25% of suicidal hangings, but they're much more common in homicides by strangulation, occurring in about 50% of cases. Dr. Sampson consulted with multiple experts. Some argued the fractures were consistent with suicide by hanging, especially in older individuals like Epstein, who was 66. But others, including forensic pathologist Dr. Michael Baden, who observed the autopsy on behalf of Epstein's family, raised doubts. Baden stated the fractures were more consistent with homicidal strangulation than suicide. On August 16th, Dr. Sampson released her conclusion. Jeffrey Epstein's death was a suicide by hanging, but not everyone was convinced. So what really happened? Let's break down the main theories. Theory 1. Suicide, the official narrative. Epstein knew he was facing decades in prison. The court documents had just been unsealed, exposing more details about his crimes. His legacy was destroyed. His legal team had failed to get him bail. He saw no way out. The evidence. The autopsy ruled it suicide. Epstein had attempted something similar just weeks before. He was a man who'd lived a life of luxury and power, now facing a humiliating downfall. But the inconsistencies are hard to ignore. How did he manage to hang himself with his knees nearly touching the ground? Why was his cellmate removed? Why weren't the guards doing their job? Why was the camera broken? Theory 2. Murder. Someone wanted Epstein dead. With his connections to billionaires, politicians, and royalty, he knew too much. If he cooperated with prosecutors, powerful people would fall. The theory: an assassin or a guard on someone's payroll entered his cell and strangled him. The broken camera, the sleeping guards, the missing cellmate, it was all coordinated. The evidence: the neck fractures that experts say are more consistent with strangulation. The unbelievable series of coincidences that all had to happen for Epstein to die. But there's no direct evidence of an intruder, no forensic proof of a struggle. And MCC, despite being poorly managed, is still a federal prison. Sneaking in an assassin would be incredibly difficult. Theory 3. Assisted suicide, a middle ground. What if Epstein wanted to die, but someone helped him? Perhaps a guard looked the other way, or someone provided him the means to do it more effectively. This would explain both the suicide conclusion and the suspicious circumstances. Epstein wanted out, and someone with an interest in his silence made it easier. The truth? We may never know for certain. Epstein's death ended the criminal case against him. You can't prosecute a dead man. Victims who'd waited years for justice were left without their day in court, but the investigation didn't end. In 2020, Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's longtime associate and alleged accomplice, was arrested. In 2021, she was convicted of sex trafficking and is currently serving 20 years in federal prison. The two guards on duty the night Epstein died, Tova Noel and Michael Thomas, were charged with falsifying records. They admitted to not checking on Epstein and covering it up. They accepted a plea deal and avoided prison time. The Metropolitan Correctional Center, plagued by dysfunction and understaffing, was closed in 2021. It remains shut to this day. In 2023, the Department of Justice released a report confirming the catastrophic failures at MCC: poor management, overworked staff, broken equipment. But the report stopped short of suggesting anything beyond incompetence. For Epstein's victims, his death brought a complicated mix of emotions. Some felt relief that he was gone. Others felt robbed of the chance to confront him in court. And for the rest of the world, Epstein's death became a symbol of distrust in institutions, a reminder that sometimes the truth is murkier than we'd like it to be. So, how did Jeffrey Epstein die? Officially, it was suicide. A broken man who couldn't face the consequences of his actions. But the circumstances, the failures, the coincidences, they all raise questions that may never be fully answered. Was it suicide? Was it murder? Or was it something in between? What we do know is this: Jeffrey Epstein's death ensured he would never testify, never name names, and never face true accountability. And maybe that was the point.